Delve into the intricate world of South African funeral practices, where tradition, social status, and economic realities often collide. Have funerals evolved into social events, and what are the latest trends shaping how we say goodbye? What are the deeply rooted cultural expectations of hosting elaborate send-offs as a reflection of honor and status, and the immense pressure this places on families to potentially spend beyond their means? What are the driving forces behind this social pressure, and is it a sustainable practice in our modern times? Joining us now to have this conversation is the CEO of Legae Funeral Homes, Legae, is joining us in studio. And then we also have cultural expert, Professor Newzroom Afrika, who is joining us to unpack the phenomenon of the so-called big funeral culture. Munacheng, let's start off with you. Very good morning to you.
Good morning, Adrian.
Being somebody who works in the industry, what we've just played now, but early on before we went to the break, probably comes as no shock to you. But what informs these trends that we are seeing?
I think, Adrian, firstly, we need to begin this conversation and say that we are in the events management business, specializing in funerals. So when one then comes to us, we are then dedicated in ensuring that we, number one, give a dignified service, but over and above, ensuring that we listen to your needs, because you know your loved one more than anything else. The reason why I then brought the events management, it's just like a wedding. A wedding day you want to remember for decades to come. It's the same as a funeral. It's the last time that you will have to say goodbye to your loved one. We don't know what kind of relationship you would have had with this person over time while they were still alive. And this is your opportunity to ensure that the send-off is made accordingly.
You don't judge?
Oh, no, not at all, because our job is, you know, the trend. We speak and we don't judge. We are there to ensure that people are able to, you know, give respect according to how they deem the respect to be.
Irrespective of the amount of money that is involved. And for instance, in that package there, we spoke to Baroka Funerals. They say nothing less than 50,000, and they go all the way up to 600,000. That is that specific funeral home. So irrespective of the money.
Look, I think, Adrian, we need to really bring it back. We understand the different income groups that we have inside South Africa, and we cater to all of them. Yes, we have families that have other expectations, they have other requests, and we make sure that we are able to, you know, give according to what they need.
Okay. Professor Mdende, once again, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation as well. What do you make of the observation that you have made of the elaborateness of some of the funerals that we are currently seeing in South Africa and the type of money that is spent on these send-offs?
Thank you, Aldrin, and your guest. You know, I like it when your guest was saying that they are in a business. So we're not talking about giving honor to those who have left us. They are talking about business. That's point number one. Point number two, let us not deceive ourselves to say this is made to all South Africans. It is made to a certain group of South Africans, and this group of South Africans does not include other South Africans, like the Muslims. They don't have such things. Like the Hindus, they don't have such things. Like the Jews, they don't have that in South Africa. It's only African Christians. Let me be straightforward. And that is also influenced by these funeral parlors and insurance companies. That's a confusion, because listen to the insurance companies. They will say the most horrible thing in African culture to say, we also cater for after tears. So it's a lot of confusion. And this is made by those people who are syncretic. That is, those people who are practicing one or two religions, even in the, besides funeral parlors, even in the process of the funeral themselves, you will find that people will go, even if it's my neighbor, will go in the morning to have the afalo as a breakfast, and there will be fruit, and what type of a coffin is that? And there are two types of funerals. There is what they call Tommy Baki, I don't know in English, hanging off the uniform. And you'll find that funeral on its own, and you have to spend a lot. And there is that day of the funeral, they will be there for the whole day. And because some of them, that's how that fight, some of them are diabetic, therefore must have fruit and so on. So what I'm trying to say, it is a certain class that you find all these things, and is not honoring African culture. In fact, is displacing it with the new trends of making money.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by the impact that it has on African culture?
In the first place, in African culture, we don't keep the deceased for a long time. But because now we have to keep it, because I have to go to this funeral parlor and go to the bank and this and that and that. According to African culture, a person is buried within 3 days. And there are no expenses as such. And there are no services. And to say you are celebrating, how can you celebrate somebody who's still in the mortuary? You say you celebrate. And now the designer clothes. You have heard people talking about the designer clothes. What for? Why do we have designer clothes? And again, you'll find even in the funeral having those designer clothes, the mourners are the ones who are comforting the people who have come to comfort them. So it's a whole lot of confusion. We can't say these are African funerals.
Yep.
These are a colonial, confused money-making schemes.
Money-making schemes, Munacheng. The opening remarks from Professor Mdende was that it is a business that you're running at the end of the day. But the point that she stresses, though, about, for instance, with the various religious groups, are we bumped into a guy who actually comes from Saudi Arabia, who's Muslim, and we were asking him, how much would you spend on a funeral with your family? And he says, nothing. But in South Africa, things are very different. This is now speaking outside of the Muslim as well as the Jewish religion that Professor Mdende has pointed out. Is there something about Christianity that allows for this elaborateness and also fading away of the culture of Africans?
I think we firstly need to bring this into context. I understand the prof and where she's coming from, but let's actually come back and inform the whole country as to this is not a sort of African context. You go to places like Ghana, I'm talking about West Africa, where Prof says that no, we are supposed to be burying within 3 days. In Ghana, they are able to keep a deceased for over 9 years before a burial takes place. So there isn't anything that then says it dictates what culture is. Culture depends on the different provinces that we are in, because one is done in Polokwane is differently what is done in Nongoma. So we need to make sure that we understand. Then when we come back to this Christianity conversation, I think we need to then not also filter this as to, no, we are seeing people with the new age trying to make things as what we are seeing currently. The Muslims, the Hindus, they also have their own culture. And according to their culture, that's what they follow. So let's not then conflate this whole conversation in making sure that what we are doing, it's not about the money. And I think that's what the difference is. Let's bring it back.
You also said that it is business.
But it's not about the money. It's about ensuring that we cater to the needs of the family in remembering their loved one. And that's what we do. Unfortunately, because we live in an economic world that needs money to ensure that those needs and those requests are afforded, that is why an invoice is then afforded in that manner.
Yeah, Professor Mdende, at the end of the day, it is about the send-off of a loved one. And as Munacheng has explained, that the family knows best what this loved one liked, what the loved one wanted, and they are going to ensure that they are able to send him off, or that particular person, with the expectation of what the individual would have wanted for their final send-off. So more about the person that is being sent off, but what we understand about funerals as well, that it's also about the people that are left behind.
But if you look at it, if you can take some statistics, you'll find that these are people that are living in urban areas. These are people of a certain class who want that. And we no longer have mourners today, because these are the people who are going to say, I want this level of the funerals. And to find that sometimes the very same children, they were not even taking care of the deceased, but because they wanted the world to see how rich they are. It is a question of class that we find today. Because to somebody who is getting SASA, you won't find this, because the guest there won't get money, enough money for that. So even the tent, you are told which one, the 2 poles or whatever. So it's all about money, it's all about class, it's all about religion, it's all about geographical areas.
Yep.
So this is what is happening. Otherwise, when it comes to African spirituality, no expenses. That is why in our form of spirituality, even coffee was black coffee, and you still find them in other areas. And you find the very same people who claim to be looking of African culture. Once there's a funeral and I make a black coffee, they will say, no. This is outdated. Are you here to measure the level of food or to mourn with me? So that's why I'm saying this is a confusion amongst Africans themselves, and they are making us a laughing stock to the world, because you don't find this amongst the rich people. You find it amongst us, being the poorest in South Africa. And I'm not going to talk about Ghana. I want to talk about South Africa, because here there are so many deaths because people want to get rich. But if you can go back and have those black coffees, like if you go to a white funeral, you will get just a glass of drink and a biscuit and you go home, and they don't die. But if you come to us, because there's a lot of money, I'll be able to buy a new car. Therefore, people are killing each other for insurances because they want this money to get rich. It's a money-making scheme. Yep. Insurances or funeral parlors. Some people, they stop their teaching professions. They go to funeral parlors because it's where you get money. So you can't talk about the respect for the deceased. No, that's a lie, is to get rich. Otherwise, even to say you celebrate, you can't celebrate when people are mourning. Why can't you celebrate after the funeral what Mamum Dede was doing?
Yeah, actually, one of the packages that we'll be playing a bit later on the channel focuses on what Professor Mdende has highlighted there, and that is looking at funeral insurance homes and how they are also defrauding mourners, but on the other end as well, people killing people for that money. But in conclusion, Monageng, I want to touch on this. One of the funeral operators that I was speaking to was saying to me, look at it this way. So you have a funeral insurance. Somebody pays, let's say, 100 Rand a month to cover the funeral policy, to cover family members and loved ones. Maybe one of the person is a father, a mother, and with that mother, looking at that mother who you've always wanted to buy a house for, but could never afford to buy a house for, because 100 Rand won't buy you a house. But when the person dies, there's a lump sum that comes out. And because of that lump sum that comes out, you want to then spend all of that money on that final send-off. And that's the reason why we are seeing funerals becoming elaborate, even sometimes in poorer places where there is still that funeral policy lump sum payout.
I think, Adrian, firstly, let me respond to the Prof. And I think with her regalia today, it then says to me that she's coming from the Eastern Cape. These are actually people who then say to us that when there's a funeral, they then say, Ungameleni. ubhubhile kanti lo muntu. So where it truthfully says that it just translates to then saying, what is the rush? This person is already dead. And why we need to then make sure that we respect all cultures, it's making sure that we are able to give the different cultural groups that are in our country the respect that they deserve. Let's come, and I will be very interested in seeing these other segments that you are coming in, especially the funeral insurance that we have. We firstly need to go and focus on the financial education that we give to our people. And I'm hoping that today with Newzroom Afrika, as we see that you are running this as a segment, that you will actually touch on that element of the financial education. Our people, our communities, utilize funeral policies as funeral life policies. And that's where the difference is. If we could actually ensure that we get into the knowledge of the financial education of making the differences between how you need to make sure that these things are done accordingly. Funeral policies are to be spent on ensuring that funerals are done in an according manner. Your catering, your videography, everything that you need, especially after COVID. We have seen a trend now where people are asking us that I can't travel from Cape Town for a funeral. Please, can you live stream this so that I am also part of the experience itself? And this is all different accommodations that we do as funeral partners.
Thank you so much. Munacheng Legae is the CEO of Legae Funeral Homes, and then we also have Professor Nokzola Mdende, Sociology and Anthropology Professor. Truly appreciate your time this morning.